I was born on July the 28th, 1921, in a little country town in the mountains of Virginia, Appalachia, Virginia. I was born in an apartment upstairs over the dry goods store which my father and grandfather owned and operated. My dad was quite an avid photographer, and there are lots and lots of pictures of me as an infant. When it started to flood and they said, get out of here, because the house was in a low-lying area, like most of the city was in the low-lying area. Dad brought us all to the store. When the flood was over and things were sort of semi getting back to normal, Mother and I and the porter, the black man who cleaned up the store, went to the house to see what was left and what the damage was. And somehow or other, I got the notion that there must be some food in the ice box. I'll go in and get something to eat. And I grabbed the handle of the refrigerator. And of course, I'm standing in mud, and it had shorted out, and I was being electrocuted. I couldn't get my hand off. The colored guy heard me scream, and he ran into the kitchen because he and Mother went in another part of the house, grabbed me and pulled me off of that thing. Mother said the black man turned white and I turned black. From Middlesboro, the family moved to La Follette, Tennessee. And while my folks were there, they bought their very first home. I attended grammar school and high school in La Follette and graduated in 1938. I think we just grew into it. Well, you know, it wasn't like my father's day when they met in April, got engaged in May, and married in June. It didn't happen that way. We just sort of grew up together, I guess you would say. We were together in classes, we were together in fraternity, sorority stuff, and we dated. We went to the movies, or we went to picnics, or whatever it was we were doing, we just did it together. Early in 1941, during my third year at Vanderbilt, I decided I really wanted to fly. So I enlisted in the Navy as a Naval Aviation Cadet. I was the first to join the service, but eventually all four of the Sturm boys served in the Navy. I'm being transferred. I'm coming through Nashville. We should get married next Tuesday. She says, but wait a minute, there's a big shower for me on Wednesday. And I said, well, you have to cancel that. That was the first time, I guess, that I exerted my authority. During most of World War II, I was attached to VD-2, a photo squadron in the Atlantic Fleet. We spent most of our winters in the Caribbean doing mapping for the Hydrographic Office. And in the summertime, they sent us up to northern Canada to do some special photographic missions. We started out flying the PBY, but later we switched to the Lockheed PV, which could fly higher and faster. And I was ordered up there to Project SPAM, the Special Alaska Magnetic Survey Unit, and I was in charge of photography. We also had a mechanic, radioman, we had a geologist, we had an electronics engineer, and they were part of our crew. We had a big crew, like 15 of us. And so, off to Alaska. There was no training because we were a self-sustained unit. Everybody in the unit was an expert. And then we spent the better part of from July to November, I guess, doing an aerial magnetic survey of an area in Alaska was called in those days Naval Petroleum Reserve 5. So we had a set of photographs that the Air Force had made, or the Air Corps, Army Air Corps had made, of this area that we were going to do. And so there were no maps. So we used these photographs as maps. And our plane had an airborne magnetometer. It was a long tube-like thing stuck in the tail that stuck out the back end. Instead of taking pictures with a big camera, we were taking magnetic readings. In order to correlate the magnetic readings with the photographs, we had to know where we were. And so we had a very special camera called a Sonnet, 35 millimeter camera. It made a picture 400 feet long. It had a clock on it. So you match the clock on the photography with the clock on the airborne magnetometer against the Air Force pictures, and you can make a map. That's what we did. And we were doing that when they dropped the atom bombs in Japan. In fact, on the day they dropped the first one, we were flying between Point Barrow and Fairbanks and listening to the shortwave radio, and we heard it in our earphones. So I was in some interesting places at interesting times. After the war, I went back to Vanderbilt and earned my BA degree. And then I was back to the Navy. I became the Public Information Officer at the Naval Air Station, Memphis. And while on active duty, I used to drive into town twice a week to go to law school. I did that for over 2 years and finally completed all of the educational requirements and passed the Tennessee bar in 1949. In order to provide housing for its officers, the Navy decided to convert old bachelor officers' quarters into new units for married personnel. And Sarah and I were lucky enough to get one of these new units. It was a huge apartment. It had 4 bedrooms, a huge living room, and it was written up by the Memphis newspapers as a novel experiment on the part of the Navy. We lived there 6 years, and there was a talk of the town. Our bathroom had 2 of everything: 2 commodes, 2 showers, and 2 urinals. We liked it very much, and we had a good time there. All was going well until, as we say in the Navy, I got orders. And I had to give up my lovely apartment in Memphis to head for Niagara Falls, New York. And it wasn't even my honeymoon. In Niagara Falls, I meet Jimmy James, who was the commanding officer. And he was a wheeler-dealer of the first order. And we did a lot of great deals in Niagara Falls, Buffalo, including an air show that made history for that part of the world. I produced a Naval Air Reserve Day, made the biggest traffic jam in the history of Western New York. People were on their highways and byways in the air station, and I ran it, including published in the magazine to go with it, and the publicity in the newspapers and the radio and the television, and exploit the Blue Angels, who were stars of our show. Never had an air show like that. We met with the Highway Patrol and the Sheriff's Office and the police departments. And I said, we really need to watch out because we're going to have a lot of people. Oh, don't worry, Commander, we can handle it. We can handle it. They couldn't handle it. I went back there a few years later and did another one. They listened to me the second time. That was a big success, and I got a commendation from the Admiral in Chicago. I was selected as the Man of the Year, and I got a certificate and a big shot. I was on my way to the golf course in Santa Ana from Garden Grove. and I was on a back street appropriately named Hazard Avenue. And I was driving my little Nash Rambler station wagon, but it was really out in the country. And there was a farmer with a tractor, a lowboy tractor, with a tractor on top of that. And he was in the field and stuck in the mud. And they were trying to get it out, to make it unstuck. And they were rocking the car, rocking the big truck. And it rocked up and got onto some solid something and came out into the road just as I came along. Well, the lowboy was out in the middle, out into the road, about halfway into my lane. And my front right headlight hit the end of the trailer. And my car went left, right, and left and right. It bounced like from wheel to wheel. And on the second bounce, I was thrown out the right-hand door, which came open. And I landed on my bottom on the street. Across the street from where this happened was a house. And the lady in the house saw this and came out. And they were calling an ambulance. In the road, this photographer comes to take a picture of me. He took my picture, and then he said, "Oh, God, it's Howard Sturm." He was a Marine pilot and in one of my reserve squadrons. So they called Los Alamitos, and they sent an ambulance over. That was about 5 miles from the air station to where I was. And they took me up to Corona, which was a big naval hospital at that time, not there anymore. When Mother got there, they had a chaplain there, a rabbi from Riverside, I guess, had come over. And that really shook Mother up when she saw that. At any rate, they pumped me full of blood. Santa Ana hospitals didn't have blood like you do today. So I got 18 pints of blood over the next 3 or 4 days. And the story is that one Navy doctor, a black fellow, young man, sat up with me all night, hand pumping the blood into my system because it wouldn't drip in. I had no pressure flowing in my system. And he sat there with a hand pump and pumped the blood in. For a while, it was touch and go. They didn't think I was going to make it.